Hello, and welcome to the Get Strong, Lose Weight podcast, where we believe that getting in shape should be simple. Confusion is the enemy, and when you feel strong, capable, and confident, you live a better life. I am your host, Coach Jay, and I am here with Coach Mike. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you guys?
I am fantastic.
Good.
So we're going live today on YouTube for the first time in a long
Cool.
time. And today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've discovered about how to keep people safe indoors or at the gym or outside at the gym during this time of COVID. So we've done a lot of work over the last, I guess, 8, 9 months to keep everyone
Yeah.
safe. And when we first started doing this, we didn't know a whole lot, but now we know quite a bit more about how to prevent the spread of this virus, and we've got some updates on things that we do. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
S-
So yeah, go ahead. There's a lot of information still out there floating around, and and even with the CDC and the World Health Organization and folks, there's still some conflicting information out there. And so what they've done recently is try to kind of take all of that and make sense of it, and like
yeah,
figure out like what scientifically kind of makes the most sense and what's the most recent stuff that people are publishing.
yeah. And really, the reason for this is because we don't get any really specific guidance about what to do other than there should be some social distancing and people should wear masks, but there's a lot more people that are actually studying what works than I guess information that we get and than guidance that we get. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, let's start by talking about what we currently do, and then let's talk a little bit about the sort of new information you found in the recommendations. So when people come to the gym, what kind of experience do they get? Like, what kind of safety precautions are we taking?
Right. And so first thing is, you wait at the door to get checked in, and you test when you come in the door that you don't have any symptoms, right? And that you haven't been around people that have COVID or have symptoms, right? And so and when you if you come inside, you need to have a mask on at all times, that covers your nose and your mouth. And when you're working out, if you're working out inside at all, you're going to be in kind of your own designated area, and you're not supposed to move around. I think the bathrooms are pretty much off limits, but I think on a one-off basis, you can work it out with the coach to maybe go use it. But we're trying to limit traffic around the gym. When
Yeah,
you're coming in, you're kind of staying in your spot, and
yeah,
you have the equipment there ready for you already.
yeah. And then
And
so
the
go ahead.
biggest thing is like, we're trying to keep, you're basically outside as much as possible,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Even if it's cold and dark, like we're outside as much
Yeah.
as possible.
Yeah, so you'll be doing a little bit of stuff inside, but then you're doing most of the work outside.
Yep. And because of that, we're also limiting our capacity, right? So because you have designated spots and you have all these areas, we're limiting internal like class sizes to 10 to 12 people.
Yeah, so you can't come to a class. So you have to sign up for your classes, and
Yeah.
there's a limit on how many people that can come to the classes. Yep.
Yep. And then when you're done, we're wiping everything down, right? We're keeping the windows open. We're kind of making sure there's a lot of airflow. We've got air filters going on, which actually do cure the air of germs, and such. And so, we're doing all those things as well currently.
Yeah. And so we basically created these procedures based on the information we had sometime in like June or July, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we the members have been fairly good about making sure that they're following the procedures. We're wiping everything down. It's not perfect, but it's
Right.
been it's been fairly good, and thus far we haven't had any issues. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. We haven't had anyone uh, that was COVID positive kind of show up and do a class at all, or a coach or anything like that. So we haven't had to do any contact tracing, anything like that, at the gym at all.
yeah, yeah. So
And I
that
don't know of any. I haven't heard of personally of any members themselves having had COVID,
yeah,
but I know that people that have had symptoms have been kind of staying away. et cetera. So they've been very useful and helpful at that.
Yeah. So, so the idea here is we really wanted to make a place that people felt safe, where they could continue to get their training, right? So
Yep.
we found that for the 3 or so months that we were closed, that a lot of people struggled to keep their fitness routine up and running.
Yeah.
And you and I talked about, like, there's ways that you can do that stuff, but if you're used to doing it a certain way, it's hard to adapt, right?
Yep.
And so I would say that so far it's been successful, but we've actually recently kind of revisited some of those safety procedures for various reasons, but also to make sure that we're doing the right things
Yep.
as we go forward, right?
Yep.
And you put together a report that kind of talks about what are some of the things that are high or low risk of transferring or transmitting COVID. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of dig into that report a little bit
Yep.
here today. Yeah.
Yep.
So let me just pull that up. Okay. So so you might not be able to read this. Let me zoom in a little bit. There we go. Okay. So tell us about this report. Why did you pull this together?
So there's been a lot of noise recently about, should you be wiping surfaces down? Should you not? There's still the kind of whole mask debate, depending on where you live. And there's also like aerosol. There's a lot of noise recently about aerosol and what does that mean? Aerosol and like airborne, like what does that mean? So and if you look at the CDC websites and the World Health Organization websites, you also get kind of conflicting data there. Like one person says one thing, one person says another. And so the attempt here was to like find some sources that were more recent, that were like, submitted by a lot of scientists and engineers, and then like figure out, okay, what actually is happening out there, and what's the kind of general consensus, right? And why they are that way. And then also think about, okay, what's the likelihood of transmission of these things? Not necessarily the risk level, but more just like, how likely are you to get it from these methods? Right. And so around COVID, there's basically 3 ways that people are saying now that it can be transmitted. One is the first one is fomite, which is essentially surfaces, right? So someone sneezes on a surface, and then you touch it, and then you wipe your eyes or your mouth or your nose with it. So somehow there's a transfer of the virus through droplets, et cetera. And for most diseases, I'd say like common cold and flu and such, that's kind of how a lot of it gets transferred. But we know that COVID is a little different than most diseases. And so in the early days, when we didn't know as much about COVID, the big rush was wipe everything down, right? Because it was like, okay, it's a coronavirus, and it must be like all the other coronaviruses, so let's just wipe everything down, and that's the way to go, right? But what happened is like that was the focus for everyone. Everyone was just wiping everything down. But what we found recently in more recent studies is that, yes, the virus can exist is detectable on a surface for several days. Like no one's actually been able to actually have the virus be infectable after that, after a certain period of time.
So you're saying that it stays on the surface, but it's hard for you to pick up from that surface.
Yeah, so basically what they're finding is that like it'll come on a surface, and after a couple hours, like even if it's still on that surface, if you touch that surface and then touch your eyes, like you're not going to get it, because there's no way they weren't actually able to have the virus replicate itself in these things where it's been sitting there for days.
Right.
So basically it's like a dead virus essentially, even though it's detectable after a couple hours.
Okay, so the early research said like, oh, this thing lives on surfaces for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's still
true.
They're
finding, it's true, but what they haven't been able to do is actually create a culture for the virus, which they haven't been able to have the virus actually grow from any of these surfaces, any of these surface tests, right?
So chances of you getting it are low.
Right. So really to get it this way, like 3 things need to happen, right? First, someone that's COVID positive needs to leave a lot of bodily fluid on a surface, right? And then you need to then touch that surface within an hour of them doing it, and then you need to then touch your eyes or your nose or your mouth before you wash your hands to actually get it, right? And there needs to be enough of it to transfer to have that happen. So that's like, given how we are now, like, it's very unlikely that's going to happen.
Right.
But it is still something that everyone's saying, it's just to be safe. It's probably still a good idea to kind of wipe things down. Just don't make that be the one thing you do, only thing you do, and don't be too like overly zealous about it, because a lot of cleaners also have bad things in them that can actually, if you do use them too much, can make you sick. So it's
Right.
one thing you should,
So
you
you're
know,
you're basically saying like, if I spend a bunch of time disinfecting everything, I might be getting more harm from the disinfectant than
exactly.
benefit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so then that basically means like as long as I wash my hands thoroughly, then I'm probably okay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, and I think if you want to be really safe, wipe surfaces down before you
Yeah.
use them. If you're concerned, right, about the cleanliness of a surface, and that, if you're concerned about that, then wipe it down before you use it, and
Right.
then wash your hands as much as you can, because it is
Right.
hard to not touch your eyes,
Right.
you know.
Okay.
Um, but if
Yeah.
you
So
wear a
the
mask, you're not likely to touch your nose or your mouth, and if you wear safety glasses or whatever too, then you're not probably not going to touch your eyes either before you
yeah.
wash your hands.
So just one thing we didn't mention here is like this is not Mike with a lab coat doing these
Right.
these surveys. This is based on a bunch of articles that we've linked to here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay, so you're basically saying the likelihood of transmission from touching surfaces is low. It's still
Yeah.
possible, but it's low.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So what
And
does
there's
that mean?
been
Go ahead.
and the other thing is, like, there's been no real cases where they said specifically that's how someone got it, because in all the scenarios where people have it, like, they're also getting it, they're in contact with these other methods too.
Right.
So there's no like thing that says there's no control experiment that said, okay, you know all these things are out of the place, it's only from touch.
Right.
Right? So
Yeah.
it's but it's good practice. It's like, we're coming on flu season as well, like normal flu season. So yeah, just wash your hands more, try and keep your surfaces clean.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of COVID, though, transmission likelihood is low from surfaces. So what that means is that, so you say here the scientific publications advocate the cleaning of surfaces. And so for what we're going to do is we're going to keep our current cleaning protocols, but we're going to reevaluate as we go forward.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So part of
I mean,
the part
and
of
we will always make it an option for members to do more cleaning themselves if they want. Like,
yeah,
we're
yeah.
always going to have those cleaning materials out there no matter what. And if anyone feels like they want to wipe things down more, then it'll be available for them.
To be clear, we're going to keep our current cleaning
Yeah.
protocols, but we will be reevaluating going
Yeah.
forward, right? So we're keeping those for now. But basically, what you're saying is like all the wiping down that we're doing that is not as effective as we thought it was going to be.
Right. It's not the old, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the thing that's going to keep you from getting it necessarily.
Okay. So the second one here, large ballistic droplet transmission.
So that's the most common thing that we've seen before, like where you basically cough or sneeze on somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you yell and basically something comes out of your mouth, like saliva or something comes out of your mouth, and it lands in someone else's mouth or eyes or nose.
Yeah.
And that's most common like thing we see. And the reason this is a low is because we're all used to staying away from people that are coughing or sneezing.
Right.
And we're also used to not trying to cough and sneeze on people.
Right.
So like we're already naturally kind of built in to do this. And as you socially distance, like you can only spray so far. And so 6 feet is kind of like the distance, so that if you sneeze, it's most likely not going to go past 6 feet. And so that's why the social distancing level is 6 feet. And so if you keep 6 feet apart, this one is also really low because we're all really conditioned to like not cough on people and not sneeze on each other.
Right. Got it. Okay, so yeah. So this is like basically someone coughing in your mouth or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like just, like if you see someone coughing, you're not going to go up to them. You're going to stay away from them for a while.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of normal behavior. It's
So
not something
okay, so basically what you're saying here is that yes, you can get it from this. So, keep staying away from people that are coughing and don't cough on anyone.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And so the likelihood is low because you're going to notice that they're coughing and you're not going to go up to them and be close to them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if you're at like an event where someone starts coughing, you're going to back away and like, walk away from it. The other thing I want to say, like, that we found in the research is that like, it's not so contagious, like one droplet's going to get you, right? Like it actually needs to be prolonged. Like it needs to be, there needs to be a large amount of the virus that kind of gets onto you before you actually contract it, right? It's not like one cell is going to get you. So like, if someone sneezes in your face and they have COVID, you're probably going to get enough of it that you're going to get it.
Yeah.
So like, just avoid that.
Right. Okay. Okay. So keep avoiding people that are coughing. But was one of the things that we've been asking is if you have any symptoms, then don't come in. So that's we're not changing.
And wearing a mask dramatically decreases like, the distance, right? So if you social distance and you wear a mask, the mask kind of stops a lot of liquid from coming out.
Right. Okay. Okay. All right. So then the last one here is aerosol transmission.
Right. So this is one's the most, I guess, controversial is probably the best term for it. Mostly because like it's not officially recognized by the CDC or the World Health Organization. But if you read into it, there's a lot of history there as to why they don't officially, call it an airborne disease. So basically, aerosol means it's airborne, right? When you breathe out, you're breathing out air particles that have the virus in it, and then someone else can breathe that same air and get those droplets and particles into their system, and then transmit the virus that way, right? So there's a long history behind why things are not called airborne. Some of it is a historical thing back in the early 1900s when like there's all this fear about like disease gas, and so this doctor basically put out all these publications around why like disease gas doesn't exist, so that people would actually follow normal protocols that we just talked about, like washing their hands and keeping themselves clean, because those things were easier for people to do back in the day, right? And so actually to date, like, so go ahead.
So it's like basically for political reasons, they don't like to declare things as airborne.
Well, it's hard to validate that something is airborne, right? As well, like there's scientific reasons as well, but a lot of it is historically like there's this big push to like not have things be airborne because it's really hard for people to deal with like the infection and trying to keep it trying to keep people safe, right? Because like if something back in the day, if something was airborne, like you couldn't do anything about it. And so people were just freaked out. They would like, clean. So nowadays.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. Like it's basically like they don't want people to freak out, so they don't declare it's airborne.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's a lot more studies now, and a lot of like, there's some articles I posted in here as well of like more recent studies where like airborne and aerosol transmission is the only thing that can explain things like external super spreader events and like low indoor, like small, home gatherings that are increasing the number of incidents, right? Even though people are being safe, they're still getting it and they don't know why, right? And that's aerosol is the only logical explanation for that. And so, go ahead.
So basically, this is how it's being transferred.
It seems like this is probably the biggest mode of kind of transmission right now, because people are good about staying away from people sneezing. You're probably cleaning your surfaces. This aerosol thing is probably the main thing, which leads us to believe that it's probably airborne, right? And so right now, the only two other common diseases that people have recognized are airborne are measles and chickenpox. Right. And so like the fact that there's so many diseases out there and only two are considered airborne, there's a lot of political stuff behind it, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into all of that, but I think there's also like, those things it's hard for us to kind of deal with them. Like whenever there's a measles outbreak, there's all this lockdown that happens. Right. Yeah. And so same thing, like I think there's right now, they haven't shifted there yet because of the concern of like panic and like, well, how do we deal with this? And then people have to like rethink how they're doing everything. Right. But
that's interesting because like they're doing lockdowns. So like, how would that be different?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. There's, I don't know why, like, I'm not on the CDC. I'm not at the WHO, so I can't tell, but like, it seems like there's probably some like political change management stuff that they're trying to deal with as well at the same time.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of other countries, right, if it's the World Health Organization, they publish it. Like a lot of countries don't have the ability to properly ventilate everything. Right. So like, what do they do? Are they screwed, or like, what, how are you going to deal with it? But there's been a push more recently from a lot of experts that are saying, you guys have to talk about this, or else people are never going to, be able to resolve this. And the vaccine's not going to solve everything. So like, you got to have to like make more awareness. And so if you think about aerosol, the breathing piece, like the most common analogy for this is like secondhand smoke, right? So if you imagine you're in a house and someone's smoking and you don't want their smoke, you're gonna go to some other part of the house. you're gonna avoid them. But if all the windows and doors are closed, that smoke's eventually gonna make its way to you, because there's gonna be so much, the saturation in the air of that smoke is gonna increase so much that you're gonna basically start breathing it in. And the only way to clear that out is for you to personally leave, or for you to open all the windows and doors and make sure there's proper airflow from the outside to actually kind of wash that smoke out. So if you think about like the aerosol with the virus in it, that's kind of like the smoke, right? Like the more that you're breathing inside in a closed environment, the more that kind of saturates the air. And as you breathe it, then you'll ingest enough of it. Now, what they're saying is like it's somewhere between 5 to 15 minutes in terms of of exposure in a saturated environment that will probably cause it. So a lot of times, when you look at readings, it's like, okay, if you've been next to someone that has COVID and you were close to them without a mask for more than like 5 to 10 minutes, then you really need to get tested, even if you're asymptomatic, because it's very likely that you probably got it through the aerosol transfer.
Got it. So this is the thing that we really have to figure out a way to manage.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah. So this is where you're gonna get it. It hasn't been declared because of a whole bunch of political reasons that we can't explain. But basically, all your research has kind of led to we need to manage aerosols somehow.
Yep.
Okay. So
what you'll also find is that there are certain places that have managed aerosol well, that have had people that were sick. They're all day coaching, and then no one else actually got it.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So that's what I was gonna talk about next here. So basically, let's talk about some of the procedures that we're doing and some of the things we might change as a result of this.
Yep. So the likelihood of getting it outside is like 20 times less likely outside versus inside, just on a whole, right?
Yep.
Because there's just more air, the air is fresher, there's going to be more circulation. So that's why we're keeping as many of the classes and as much of the full class outside as possible, right? Yep. So that's the number one thing.
Yep.
The number two thing then is wearing a mask, right? Because a mask greatly reduces the amount of aerosol that leaves, that kind of comes out. And like all the stuff about, it doesn't trap CO, the aerosol, it does. Basically, because the mask is porous, what happens is the aerosols get stuck to the mask and they stay there. So I would say, like, if you wore your mask for a while, you should go and wash it. You should like have a new mask every day that you kind of, don't just reuse a dirty mask all the time.
Right.
But like, wear a mask. And there's a couple of links in here that you guys will see, like also wearing it properly. So there's actually videos of proper mask wearing and improper, and you can see like the people that have gaps in their mask, etc. A lot of the air still comes out.
Okay.
So wearing a mask properly is important as well. So those are the top two things that you can do without anything. The next one is then improving the ventilation and airflow. So if you are going to be inside, improving airflow, not just internally, but making sure you have a good, clean source of air that's coming in. So either running a filter, a strong filter. So if you're at home and you have a heater that has a blower that has a filter through it, you should run that all the time. If you can, because it'll actually filter out particles. But the best thing is to keep your windows and doors open and have a lot of fresh air out from the outside coming through, so that your inside air is as much like the outside as possible.
Right. And so this kind of leads to that article that you mentioned about the gym that basically like had things loading here. The gym that had a coach had COVID. And because they had ventilation, nobody else caught the COVID.
Yep. And basically what they did is they basically had made sure most of their doors and windows are open.
Yeah.
And then they ran some fans to make sure that there was good airflow coming through.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So this part is kind of new because we obviously, we've been keeping people outside, and then getting masks inside, but
Mhm.
it was after we saw this article that it kind of sparked our interest in exploring this a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so we started testing a CO2 monitor. So tell us
Yep.
about that and why we're doing that.
Yeah. So what a lot of the more recent studies are also saying that a CO2 monitoring can be a good way to detect hotspots where you might have like virus concentration. And the reason is because as humans, we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out CO2, right?
Right.
So the amount of CO2 that's in the air is a proxy for how much humans are breathing out in an environment,
Right.
right? And so there's a push now for like using CO2 detectors to see, okay, how much human based kind of breathing is happening in a space,
Right.
and how much CO2 generation is happening. And so what you do is you basically use your CO2 monitor, you measure outside to get a baseline. It's probably going to be around 400 parts per million. And then you measure inside, and what you want to do is keep it under about 700 parts per million.
Right.
So they're saying like 700 is kind of the safe level. Like if you're under 700, you're probably very safe from
Right.
it on a whole. Now, clearly, if we're in a big room and I'm standing next to you and I'm talking to you and I have COVID, you might get it because you're so close to me, right?
Right.
But on a whole, if you're socially distanced and you're wearing masks and your levels are below 700, then you probably have good airflow.
Got it. Okay. So this is this is one of the things that has been a sort of new revelation for us, and we got a CO2 monitor, and we've been
Yep.
kind of playing around with it in different rooms to see what it's like. So we're about 450 outside, I think it was 450
Yeah.
parts per million outside, and then we brought it inside, and we left it in when we were doing classes or when people were working out, and what did we notice?
I think it's been like, I don't think it's gone over 500 at all the
Yeah.
whole time, right? Like it's pretty much, partially we have really high ceilings. We keep the doors open, the windows open.
Yeah.
I think that it hasn't measured above 500 at all. I mean, I haven't been in all the classes, but I feel like it's very low. It's like way below 700 for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So just pulling up a picture here of the gym. I mean, it's basically a big gym with lots of empty space. And so we put this thing in the front, and we found like we kept the doors open. I don't even think we had the fans on when we were doing it because we are just testing it, and it never got above
Yeah.
500, right?
Yeah.
So it's essentially the equivalent of being outside.
Yeah, I mean, you're within a margin of error that like you're most likely like outside. Like I tried it in my house. Like I had it over Thanksgiving weekend, and there was times when I was at like 800-900
Yeah.
easily,
Yeah.
right, at the house. And then you know people go to bed, and like at nighttime it was around the 500s.
Yeah.
And then like it would go up and down depending on what was happening. So
Yeah,
if we're under 500 the whole time, we're like as much like outside as you could probably get.
yeah, and I tried it in an office where there was 3 or 4 people with no masks on. It gets over 1,200, like really
Yeah,
fast, like almost
yeah,
immediately. This thing is like super responsive, and
yep,
so what we're finding is that essentially, like even that article that I shared about the trainer that exposed 50 people, the reason that none of those people got it is because there was good ventilation in there, and their parts per million likely didn't get above 500-600, right?
yeah.
And we find the same thing with our gym, even with the doors closed. And so when you add in that people wear masks in the gym, and we also have air filters, there's a lot of evidence that we're minimizing that risk. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're basically doing like we're de-risking it as much as possible, right? Like
Yeah.
there's not much else you can do to to de-risk, the fact that the COVID's around.
Yeah. So we're gonna give you all links to all of these articles. We'll put them with the show notes for this. Um, just one thing as I thinking about it, that gym where the trainer exposed 50 athletes, they didn't wear masks, did they?
I don't know. I can't remember. I
Yeah,
don't.
I don't think they did.
Yeah,
They didn't have masks
but
inside.
they did. I think they had stations that like socially distanced,
They
right? So
did
like
socially
skip the.
distance. Basically, what they had was an HVAC expert that was a member, and he said,
Yeah.
"Hey, you need to do this, this, and this," and
Yeah.
basically they had like,
Yeah.
ventilation, and then they installed these same CO2 monitors, and they didn't have masks and they didn't have an issue. So if they were safe, then we'll be safe, and we're adding the additional safety precaution of wearing masks, and making
Yep.
sure that anybody who has any symptoms doesn't come in. So, I thought this was really informative and useful, and I wanted to make sure we shared it with people because I know there's a lot of fear around the risks and what are we exposing ourselves to. And a lot of times that fear can be mitigated through just scientific information.
Yeah.
And so there's no, if you can ignore the sort of politics of all of this and focus on what are the facts, I think it's important for us to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to mitigate the risk for the people that come in.
Yeah. I would say like this information, like it's applicable to anyone, right? So like if you were gonna do stuff at your house or whatever, like use this and apply it to what you're doing at home and anything else like that.
Yeah.
The CO2 monitor is not, it's like less than $150. It's like not that expensive, and it's a very good way for you to just feel safe if you want, if that's kind of the thing you need.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and we'll give a link to that as well. All right. Is there anything else that you want to add in here, Mike?
No, I just want to, say that like everyone's been really great. Like I want to thank our members for all the diligence they've been putting into like following the rules and just like being safe and making it a manageable situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll keep that up. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate all the work that you put into this.
Yeah.
And like I said, we'll share these in the show notes so that you guys all have access to that. And I think that's all we've got. We'll see you next
Cool.
time.
All right. Thanks. Bye.